And I'm sorry to say that the diseases don't disappear. They seem to change and look different, and something new comes in all the time. I was told also to warn you, I have a couple of nasty pictures. Maybe some of you just get disappointed because they're not that nasty, but we'll see what you think. We're quite used to this picture these days about the COVID-19 and transmission of viruses. So in this picture, we're all on the main street and we have close contact, and in terms of transmission, it's a good chance to catch something. If we think about reindeer, they're sort of dispersed in open, vast areas, but really they are gregarious. They move around in a herd. If you cull half of the herd, the rest of the herd would still be this close, which is one challenge that we met with this prion disease, chronic wasting disease. So culling a reindeer herd will not work as good as for other diseases or other populations. Also, when we look at, this is an old map, maybe still not valid, but it illustrates my point that if we move from reindeer from the winter pasture areas here in Finnmark inland to the coastal areas, then you see that they're spread out in different herds, and then they come back and gather together on the winter pastures. So my point is that a reindeer herd, even if it's 30 or 300 animals, they have contact with quite a few other herds during the reindeer year. This is a system of gathering and handling and sorting animals for slaughter. Maybe over here, this is your animals, this is my animals, my uncles and aunt and whatever. But they're all going through this spot, which is the working fence. This is a picture from Ingebjørg, one of my colleagues at the Vet Institute, and it's showing just the breath of reindeer. It's not dust because it's in the winter. So it's the moist and the breath of a lot of animals stressing around in the working fence. So if you think about COVID-19 and the face mask, it's relevant also in this case. Another introduction is this lack of pastures or maybe ice-blocked pastures due to climate change. This is an extreme picture from Svalbard. Huge amounts of snow, difficult to dig, and also these rain on snow events during winter, which is also expected to be coming in higher frequencies during this climate change era that we are looking at. And this is, of course, what we want to avoid: emaciation and starvation. This is a completely emaciated animal, no fat in the heart, around the heart anymore, and you can see every bone sticking out. So feeding is one mitigation approach. And I will talk now about the disadvantages or the challenges of feeding. But of course, feeding has saved more animals than it has killed them. So it's basically a good mitigation strategy. You can feed animals in the mountain area like here, or you can corral them, or you can even keep them around your house if you want. Then you move from a herding situation into husbandry and farming. It's also a challenge with hygiene in these corrals if you corral the animals. And also if you decide to corral your animals, you really take the responsibility of giving them the right food, the right amount of food, the right timing of starting feeding, and also the hygienic conditions, predators, shelter from sun and wind and precipitation and so on. So if you shelter an animal, no matter what kind of animal, you sort of take the full responsibility for it. This is the transmissible eye infection, starting with a grayish or bluish eye due to edema in the cornea. And it might develop from an initial viral infection, herpes virus, to secondary bacterial infections, usually in calves, since the virus is latent in adult animals, transmitted to calves, which is not immune to it. And then you get an outbreak, a disease outbreak among the calf section of the herd. There is also other impacts, possible impacts from this herpes virus. It's cervid herpes virus 2. So it's quite common, and also in Sweden and Finland and Norway. It might induce abortion or weak-born calves. Now we see these outbreaks of eye infections usually after moving animals over longer distances in stress. We know also in other herpes viruses, also in humans, that stress is one of the main factors for outbreaks. And the last point here is that herpes virus produce small lesions in the mucosa, which can also be a point of infection for parapox virus or necrobacillosis that I will mention further here. This is just a map in a publication or a manuscript that we're writing now, just to show that the data we're basing these observations on are not just from one herd or one region. It's basically throughout the reindeer herding Norway. This is an outbreak in Sweden. It's Ulrika Rockström treating some animals, and the other picture is this is Ulrika is giving a general injection, antibiotics, and this is a local treatment by herders for eye infections. So disease outbreaks cause a lot of stress and trouble and labor, work, and also costs for the reindeer herder. This is a contagious eczema. It's a munskur or munvårtsjukan in Swedish. It's a parapox virus that started out with huge outbreaks in Finland in the early 90s. Has been going on since, almost every year, I think. We've had a few outbreaks in Sweden and a couple of outbreaks in Norway, but Finland has been struck really hard in some regions. It's a zoonosis, so it infects humans, and it's also a very common virus in sheep and goats, worldwide actually. So it's probably a transmission from sheep in reindeer. It can also look like this. It starts with just a foul smell from the mouth, or you can see that this animal is not really shaping up. And then if you look inside the mouth, it might look like this. So we say sometimes that you have to open the mouth of an animal to read the situation. It's not easy to open the mouth of a reindeer, I can promise you. It will not agree on that, but that's where you can find the real proof of, both by smell and if you can see things like this. This is a dead animal, so it's easy to open up. This virus can also be transmitted to the udder of the mother. This is actually from an outbreak in Iceland 3-4 years ago, sorry. This is an infection caused by Fusobacterium necrophorum. It's a bacterium that is common in the rumen. So animals are actually carrying this potential pathogen in their bodies. This is a digital form that is called slubo in Sami. This is a wild reindeer. We don't see this very much in semi-domesticated reindeer these days, but it used to be very common when reindeer were kept for milking and draft animals and corralled close to the settings. But these days, this is a more common variant of the disease. It's the oral Necrobacillosis. It attacks the mucosal lining of the mouth, the esophagus, and further down in the gastrointestinal tract. And it needs some abrasions or small wounds in the mucosa to establish an infection. This is why both parapox virus and actually the herpes virus might facilitate necrobacillosis. So these infections, they tend to work together. And in one of these outbreaks that we had and addressed in Sweden, that Ingeborg was very much involved into, and it's also published. We saw all these three infections coming out in the same herd at the same time. So I'll just thank the Veterinary Institute in Tromsø, also colleagues at the university and the funding bodies, and I'll be happy to answer some questions.